Please welcome moderator and program committee member Julie Yunker and the Fueling the Future panel.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'd like to say thank you to the program committee, me excluded, for including this important topic of biofuels in the energy ecosystem for Hawaii. With this panel, I'm really excited to introduce a couple of very key people that are playing really good roles in advancing biodiesel and biofuels in the state. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Bob King. He's president of Pacific Biodiesel, the renewable energy company he founded in Maui in 1995. Pacific Biodiesel is a producer of renewable fuel and the only commercial producer of liquid biofuel in the state. Created to alleviate the disposal of waste cooking oil, Pacific Biodiesel is now the nation's longest operating biodiesel company. The company is now spearheading opportunities for accelerating expansion of sustainable agriculture in Hawaii, farming for food and energy. Bob is a certified diesel mechanic with a background in agricultural engineering, and with his company Made in Hawaii Natural is farming sunflowers and other crops to produce culinary oils, biofuels, and other value-added products that help support food and energy security in Hawaii. So next panelist is John Mayer. He's president and COO of Island Energy Services since late 2016. Prior to his leadership role with IES, Mayer served as the general manager of Chevron's Hawaii refinery. He has more than 35 years of experience in the energy industry across the refining, marketing, and supply and trading functions. He began his career at Chevron's Richmond refinery as an engineer and continued to progress through positions of increasing leadership. He serves on the board of directors of the American Red Cross and the Hawaii Energy Marketers Association. A native of Pacifica, California, he holds a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from UC Davis. He also holds an MBA from the Haas Business School at UC Berkeley, with an emphasis on strategy and finance. I'd also like to welcome Eric Wright. He was named president of PAR Hawaii in January 2022. He was appointed senior vice president and lead executive for PAR Hawaii in January 2021. Prior to that, he was responsible for PAR's logistics system and related business development opportunities. Prior to joining PAR Pacific, Eric was on the M&A and divestiture team at the AES Corporation, a global electric generation and utility company. His experience also includes 5 years in venture capital, where he participated in debt and equity capital raises and managed complex fund restructuring transactions. Eric has a bachelor's degree in international economics from Georgetown University. He is a member of the New York Society of Security Analysts and is a CFA charter holder. Eric serves on the board of the Hawaii Nature Center. And last but not least, we have Nicolas Rodier. He's a new addition to Hawaii Gas. He's the executive director for clean energy and innovation. Nicolas joined Hawaii Gas in 2023, but has worked with Hawaii Gas team since 2018. He worked for Neighbors Drilling, Total Energies, and Hess Corporation in strategy, commercial, and operational roles. While with Hess, Nicolas led the development of a thermal power plant in New Jersey, compressed natural gas plants in New York and North Dakota, and oversaw the operation of a North Sea oil production platform before leading the corporate strategy team. Nicolas also worked for Macquarie Infrastructure Corporation, where he is responsible for the management of its solar, wind, and thermal power generation investments. Nicolas has a bachelor's degree from Brown University and an MBA from Columbia University. So please help me welcome these esteemed panelists. Thanks. So I think we're going to kick it off with Bob. And we have a couple of slides from each panelist, and then we'll throw it out to the audience for questions. So I'll leave it to you, Bob.
All right, thanks. And thanks for having me here today. Bob King, the president of Pacific Biodiesel. And I'm the mechanical guy, not the speaker, so hopefully this will go off all right. So we started in Hawaii almost 30 years ago, making biodiesel, and been built plants around, and now we're totally based in Hawaii again. And our latest plant on the Big Island is about a 6 million gallon a year biodiesel plant that does refined distilled biodiesel, so it's really high quality, using all kinds of waste feedstock and everything we can find here in Hawaii. Our big customers are the utilities, Hamakua Energy, Hawaiian Electric, KIUC, but we've also got a lot of fleets and boats and trucks that use the fuel as well. We've been using used cooking oil, although it only, less than half the capacity of the plant is all that we can find here in Hawaii. So we bring waste oil and tallow in from the West Coast, and the goal is to replace all of that with fuel that we grow here in Hawaii to get back to 100% Hawaii-sourced feedstock. So we've been farming on Maui. Some of you may have seen the sunflower fields out there. And it's one of many crops, sunflower, safflower, canola, that we've been experimenting in, and how to grow that here in the tropics, and for both culinary oil and for fuel. So this is food and fuel. It's a great way to keep the cost down, is to send it to the restaurant first and then get it back on the backside as waste oil. With our success on Maui and lessons learned on Maui, we're going to Kauai next. These silos we just set up on West Kauai at Kaumakani. This is Gay and Robinson property. So we're moving over there to do hopefully we get to 1,000 acres this year and see where it goes from there. Again, large equipment, mechanized planting and harvest, and our first field is crop is in the ground right now, 100 acres, and no herbicides, no pesticides ever, but we also haven't used any fertilizer on this one either. So it's basically just I think we're carbon negative. We farm with biodiesel. Our crushing mill that we're setting up runs on hydropower, so really no fossil inputs for this oil. Again, first food is culinary oil, and then everything else goes into biodiesel. So that's the fun part, growing and expanding and finding things. I did want to talk about some of the challenges for biodiesel production, particularly. We've had two incentives from the federal government: the Renewable Fuel Standard Program and a biodiesel tax credit. The biodiesel tax credit's expiring at the end of the year. Nobody knows what's going to happen. They haven't written the rules yet. Unlikely they'll have the rules out by the time the policy is in place in January. So maybe first or second quarter and so you're going to hear a lot probably from the national side about how a lot of biodiesel and renewable diesel is going to be tapping the brakes here until they figure out what the government would like to do. EPA, the same thing. They keep allocating the gallons of underestimating how many gallons the renewable industry can make in liquid biofuels, and then adding more products on. So biodiesel's already hitting the biodiesel gallons that are being talked about. RD, or renewable diesel, is a new fuel that's coming on. They put it into the same category, so it has to share those same gallons, and they're more than biodiesel now. And then SAF is going to be put into the same category. So they're not adding, they're trading, which is not how we need to expand biodiesel and renewable fuels in my mind. If we're going to solve this thing, we've got to add more new things instead of taking away. That's the challenge. These are big, expensive projects. You're going to hear about one coming up here. You can't finance these things for 1 year or 2 year situation. You really need to know what the government wants us to do for 10 years with surety. And then again, so some say, well, shoot, biodiesel's the first one. Let's replace that. Let's move on to renewable diesel or SAF or Electric. But remember, maybe we're the original, but I think we're still the best. So USC, University of Southern California, just did a life cycle assessment of an electric bus in Honolulu versus a biodiesel bus in Honolulu, and their conclusion, life cycle for that bus, is that it uses 48% less energy running on biodiesel than electric, 89% less water consumption, 41% less greenhouse gas, and 7% less total cost of ownership. I'm not saying let's don't do electric. I'm just saying, remember that we need all of these things. We need to not throw out the things that are working and actually very cost effective and correct for the environment. Again, this is specific to Hawaii. It's different things in different places. So we got to be careful how we spend our energy money. So again, as these new technologies emerge, I'm still rooting for biodiesel, always will, and let's bring everything new into the mix instead of displacing the older pieces, and we'll keep growing stuff. So that's my quick. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to turn it over to John now from IES to do a little overview of some of the upcoming projects you have going on.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Bob. Good morning, aloha, everyone. I'm John Maurer from Island Energy Services. I think you're going to see some common themes across the four of our presentations. We didn't collaborate on this stuff. This is all coming together independently. And I think what you're going to see is it's going to take everybody working across a lot of sectors to get to the end goals here. And so let me share that in our perspective here from Island Energy Services. First off, who are we? So Island Energy Services is a locally managed company. We're headquartered in Kapolei on Oahu, and we're focused on safely, reliably importing and distributing fuels here across the island chain. And actually, we traced back our company's heritage, coming up on almost 140 years now here in Hawaii. And so we go back quite a long time serving the needs of providing energy to the communities. One of our core values and strategies that we've been working on over, frankly, the last several years is working to help figure out how we can support the transition to renewable energy and support the goals of the state and the communities. And so we've been doing a lot of work in that space, trying to connect our assets and operations to end customers as well as suppliers of folks like Bob King and others who can provide these important fuels for the economy. Just some quick facts and figures of Island Energy Services. So, 2023, $1.2 billion of revenue. We had about 406 million gallons of fuel that we sold. Island-wide, we're about 285 employees across all the islands. And Hawaii Business Magazine top 250 list, we showed up at number 11 in the last poll about a year ago. So fairly sizable and impactful company, I think, here across the state. Our business is really kind of two segments. The first is our fuel storage capabilities. We have 5 storage facilities, predominantly on Oahu, a major operation there, significant capacity to store and receive and move fuel across the state. And then importantly, last year we commissioned a project to help alleviate some of the concerns with the Red Hill storage facility on Oahu by putting in place storage capability to meet the military requirements. Complementary to that, we have the network of Texaco stations across the state, so 58 locations and on all of the islands, and the team does a pretty good job in that market as well. But let's get to the overall, the big picture here, the way we tend to think about this. The total energy requirement for the state of Hawaii, kind of the pie chart here on the right, about 13% of that today is serviced by renewables. And the vast majority, in fact, the state of Hawaii is the most petroleum dependent state in the nation. And so you can see a distribution of about 58% of that comes in terms of feedstocks and crude oil. I'll point to my colleague here, Eric Wright, and the PAR organization. And then complementing that, there's other fuels that are brought in a more of a finished state and getting their ways into the end market. When you think about those petroleum portions of the mix, that's the bar chart on the left-hand side here. So to think about the scale of energy requirement, it's about 120,000 barrels a day. 120,000 barrels a day is the nut that we're trying to crack in terms of getting off of fossil fuels. Down at the bottom of that, you see about 33,000 barrels a day is fuel going into the utilities. That's things like fuel oil and diesel, and in some cases, naphtha and other fuels that are servicing the needs to produce energy in terms of form of power. Sitting above that, there's about 8,000 barrels a day that go into ground transportation, marine transportation for diesel fuel. The big component and what is really a unique feature here in the state of Hawaii is the jet fuel demand. 47,000 barrels a day of fuel get serviced into the market every single day to accommodate inter-island travel, as well as the visitor industry that is, core and critical to the overall economy of Hawaii. Sitting above that is gasoline. About 28,000 barrels a day of fuel is going into fuel. Largely, I like to say there's not a lot of discretionary driving in Hawaii. It's people getting back and forth to work, getting the kids to school, going on around doing the necessary things we need to, get them along with our lives. And then on top of that, there's, a smaller portion, but also important, roughly 3,000 barrels of propane fuels that's needed for cooking and homes and other purposes. And I think you're seeing a panel here that's representative of the entire industry of how this is all coming to be. So 120,000 barrels, that's a fairly significant amount of fuel that's going to need to be replaced as we talk about ambitions for 2045 and becoming a carbon neutral operation. So what is it going to take? And here's where I think you're going to get repeat. Hawaii efforts to decarbonize is going to take a whole portfolio of renewable energy. It's not just wind and solar and geothermal, but you're going to need to see things like biofuels as well. It's going to take a combination of all this to really make the impacts that I think we're all looking to see. In fact, the State Energy Office conducted a assessment. I think Act 238 required them to put together a pathway proposal of how we might get there over the next several decades. And in that report, they recognized that bioenergy and specifically biofuels and alternative fuels will play a very significant and key role in decarbonization. And so when we talk about biofuels, really what are we talking about? And it's a slate of products that look like these on the page. Biodiesel is one of them, and you heard from Bob King here. They're doing a tremendous job trying to make that all happen here locally. There's things like renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF as it's called. Renewable naphtha is another product. Renewable natural gas we'll hear more about. And then even renewable hydrogen. There's ways to kind of get that into the energy mix as well. I know an initiative here with the State Energy Office. There's a number of companies represented that participated in the hydrogen hub proposal. Unfortunately, the state wasn't awarded a grant in that initial proposal, but that doesn't mean we've stopped. There's still work going on in that space to help develop alternatives and figure out how that's going to find its way into our energy mix here in the state. So by 2045, if we think about play that all forward, there was some work commissioned initially by HECO as part of some work that they were doing to kind of map out a pathway, and then later picked up by the State Energy Office as part of the Act 238 work that they were doing. Organization called E3 put together an outside consulting organization, a lot of industry experience, and they pulled together a fairly comprehensive, in my mind, a very accurate and I think a fairly objective report about what those pathways may look like here for the state of Hawaii. And even in their report, they recognize that by 2045, in the most aggressive approaches, we're still going to need somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 barrels a day of liquid renewable fuels to meet the energy requirements for the state. So it's a matter of working across all segments of the energy landscape to really kind of bring this about. And then just the caveat to that is local production of biofuels, though helpful, and to Bob's credit, and Bob and Kelly and the organization of Pacific Biodiesel, they're doing phenomenal work. They really, truly are. But I hope you can appreciate by the scale of the issue that we're trying to resolve here, it's not like we're going to be able to kind of grow our way out of solving all the solutions here. So there's going to need to be other alternatives and things we're going to need to do to overall meet the energy requirement mix. So that's some of the thinking from how the size of the issue and how we might approach it. Some of the challenges or things that we think we need to see is Hawaii's RPS requirements for power generation are certainly driving renewable energy investments today. We're seeing that. And for the reasons we're all gathered here, I think for this conference is recognizing resiliency and reliability are going to be absolutely critical. And we're seeing some of the strains in the infrastructure today as we're trying to progress down this path. State, federal legislation framework will really help enable this. You see that from Bob, you're going to hear that from others. Things like a low carbon fuel standard, or for both production as well as imports, how to make sure that we get the right framework set up so that companies can make investment decisions and we can have some assurity as to how this can really play out in the future. And then I think, the bottom bullet here on the page, just referencing, I think conferences like this and opportunities to have engagement and dialogue so that we can share ideas and share, accurate, objective information so that everyone has the most relevant and timely, sources of knowledge. So as we're making important decisions and critical decisions, that we're doing it from a very informed basis of the most available information at the time. The chart on the right is a chart that we have pulled together internally from our company, looking at publicly available data and making some forecasts about where we see things mapping over the next 10 years. And you can see even in our view, and as things play out in terms of the utility infrastructure, as well as potentially marine customers and SAF fuels and other requirements, potentially over the next decade, we could see a quarter of the total 120,000 barrels a day being supplemented or replaced with renewable fuels. And so it's an aggressive, I think, target, but I think it's nonetheless achievable. But a lot of other stuff's going to have to happen in order for that to really kind of take hold and be able to kind of move in this pathway. So if you think about, this is how we think about it from our perspective and things we're working on today to help put in place organization and assets and legislative support to help make sure we just get this done right and get it done right really the first time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John, for giving us a whole kind of oversight and level and what's really needed and the challenges that some of these projects and biofuels are facing right now, but the importance too of these types of projects that are going to help the state achieve its 2045 goals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be here to tell you about the things we're working on at Par Hawaii. If you're not familiar with Par Hawaii, we are the only petroleum refiner in the state. We operate a refinery in Kapolei, Campbell Industrial Park. I'm John's neighbor, just down the street. And what we do is we bring in crude oil from all around the world. We process it, and it separates into components. So the fuel oil, the heaviest part, goes to power generation mostly. Diesel's next. Some of that goes to transportation, some goes to power generation. Then you have jet fuel, and then gasoline, and then we make a little bit of propane that goes into heating and cooling, heating and cooking. Thank you. Our refinery makes about 2/3 of the fuel that's used in Hawaii today. So a couple of our customers are here on stage. We make almost all of HECO's liquid fuel. Bob makes the remainder. Hawaii Gas is our customer. We provide the feedstock that makes synthetic natural gas. Hawaiian Airlines, we supply all their fuel. So really a critical link in our economy here in Hawaii. A couple years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary. The refinery was built in 1972, and it just so happened that Lieutenant Governor Green at the time was visiting the refinery and helped us cut some cake and celebrate that major milestone. And so it's really exciting after 50 years that we're making this transition and starting to make renewable fuels at our refinery in Kapolei, and I'm going to tell you more about that. But it really started 2 years ago. Last year we had Alana James was up here from Hawaiian Airlines talking about the great things they're doing. We did a partnership with Hawaiian Airlines 2 years ago to talk about local production of sustainable aviation fuel. They funded some of the engineering for our project, and then a year ago we made a major decision. We made a $90 million commitment to convert part of our plant to renewable fuels production. Most of the feedstock, the fats, oils, and greases, will have to be imported. There's just not enough of it here in Hawaii, but we have a really exciting partnership with a group called Pono Pacific. There's a couple of their leaders here today, and they're helping us try to develop oil-yielding crops in Hawaii that we could process into renewable fuels. So all of our employees are really excited about that. We were just out at Kuleima Farms harvesting some of the crops, so really exciting initiative. And then lastly, last year we actually participated in the Hawaiian Electric Stage 3 RFP. So we put in a proposal, and we plan to build a power plant at our refinery that will use this renewable fuel. So I'm really excited about that as well. A couple of charts here. I'm guessing most of you in the audience are actually familiar with the chart on the left. That's the Hawaiian Electric Oahu preferred plan. And I just want to show you how we up here on stage kind of fit into that. At the top you have solar, and you can see the stage 3 proposals being layered in there. The blue's wind, a lot of offshore wind in the plan actually. And then the green is customer-sided generation. And then the pink is where we all fit in. So that's liquid biofuels, really critical to the grid, critical for grid stability, available 24/7, and you don't actually need to build a new power plant. You can take an existing plant and just change the fuel. So biofuels are going to be really critical to Hawaiian Electric getting to where they need to be in 2045. On the right-hand side is the Hawaiian Airlines roadmap to net zero emissions in 2050. And at the top, you can see there's fleet renewal and there's efficiency, but most of the path is sustainable aviation fuel. So it's really critical that we develop sources of that. There's hardly any in the market today, but it is growing. So this is what the project looks like. $90 million. We're actually starting with a unit we put in 2019 to take sulfur out of diesel fuel. And the way you do that is you inject hydrogen in a high temperature environment, hydrogen bonds with the sulfur and it comes out. We've got some really smart engineers at the plant. They figured out that we could repurpose this for renewable fuels. And basically the way it works, there's kind of 2 steps. The first step is you're starting with what's basically a carbohydrate. You have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and you want to end up with a hydrocarbon, so you have to take the oxygen out. So this unit we put in 2019 can actually do that. It'll inject hydrogen, hydrogen bonds with the oxygen, comes out as water. At that point, you have a true hydrocarbon. From there, the hydrocarbon's actually a long, waxy chain. It's not a great fuel. So you have to rearrange it, a process called isomerization. And once you do that, it has fuel properties that it'll pour well. It basically looks like a traditional fossil diesel gallon or jet fuel gallon. So that's sort of how it works, those 2 steps. So these are the fuels we'll make. So at the top, sustainable aviation fuel, everybody knows what that is. Renewable diesel, a little bit different product than what Bob makes, but similar application. Again, it looks like a true hydrocarbon. It's almost indistinguishable from fossil diesel. And so that can be sold into the transportation market, the power generation market. Renewable naphtha, if you don't know what naphtha is, it's just low-octane gasoline. Some of that goes into the power generation market today, but we can also sell it to Julie and Nicolas as feedstock for the S&G plant and help them meet their decarbonization goals. So that's something we're really excited about as well. And then we actually make a little bit of renewable propane that we could sell to Hawaii Gas or AmeriGas. So a little bit on our partnership with Pono Pacific. Pono Pacific is a local land management and conservation company. They do great work. They've been around for almost 20 years now. And we signed an MOU with them about 1.5 years ago, and they're doing crop trials. They're really focused on a crop called camelina that doesn't need a lot of water, doesn't need a lot of fertilizer. It grows in 100 days. It can be rotated in with food crops, so it doesn't really compete with food crops. It actually complements and helps the economics of growing food crops in Hawaii. So we're starting to grow this crop, gather data on it, see what works in Hawaii. The picture here is at Kualima Farms at Turtle Bay, just from about a month ago. But we actually have trials starting on 4 islands, on Oahu, Maui, the Big Island, and Kauai as well. So just to wrap it up, one really critical thing is renewables do need a lot of incentives to make the economics work. And that's sort of what this chart shows. The goal is to get the cost of renewables to parity with fossil fuels so the end user doesn't have to pay more. It costs about $2 to $4 a gallon more to make renewable fuels. So, you're talking double, triple the cost. It's a major issue for the industry. And there's federal credits that are available. Those credits are worth about $1 to $2 a gallon. So the federal credits, they really only get you halfway there. You need credits at the state level. If you look at the places in the United States where this has worked, California, Washington, Oregon, they have credits that the state government has put in place. And so that's really critical. 50% of the diesel in California now is renewable diesel because they have the right incentives in place. So we really have to do something in Hawaii. All of us here on the stage worked on this last legislative session. We're going to be back next year. So I'm hoping all of you out there will help support this. That's it for me.
Eric, appreciate it. No, I really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of opportunities on a lot of us decarbonization goals, and definitely kind of piggybacking on some of the stuff you're doing, especially for us. But for next panelist, I'd like to introduce Nicolas Rodier. He's a new addition to Hawaii Gas. We're really lucky to have him. And we just recently made a couple announcements on 2 big projects, so I'm going to let him talk about those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. And good morning, everyone. So you've heard great presentations from Bob, John, and Eric, who are representing companies that produce and or distribute biofuels. We, however, as has been mentioned, are a potential consumer, so a slightly different take. So Hawaii Gas is committed to reducing the carbon intensity of our system. This is a commitment that comes from our ownership, our leadership, and all our stakeholders. But we want to solve for reducing our carbon emissions, but while we want to keep 2 critical elements in mind. One of them is reliability, another one is affordability, and we'll keep coming back to those issues. We're not starting. We've been at this for a very long time. Our Oahu utility system, based on synthetic natural gas, or SNG, as Eric mentioned earlier, includes up to 15% hydrogen. That is a leading position in the United States. So the state of Hawaii, through Hawaii Gas, is leading the way in terms of decarbonizing gas systems with the use of hydrogen. Our system also includes up to 2 to 3% renewable natural gas, or RNG, which in our case, at the moment, comes from the Honouliuli wastewater treatment plant. But as Julie just mentioned, we're not stopping there. We're now taking the next step forward. This week, on Monday, we announced that we're working with 2 companies, Banner Pacific and US Energy America, on a further RNG project, or renewable natural gas, and a green hydrogen project. So I think John talked about that as part of the energy mix. US Energy America will be using solar energy and recycled water to produce green hydrogen. And with that, Hawaii Gas aims to increase the amount of hydrogen in our SNG system to up to 20%. Again, a leading position both in hydrogen and green hydrogen. Banner Pacific will use banner grass, which is also known as cane grass, as a feedstock to produce RNG. It'll be, it's a crop that, again, doesn't require too much water to grow. It enhances the soil's ability to capture and sequester carbon. And the banner grass is then fed into digesters where bugs create the renewable natural gas, as well as an organic fertilizer that can either be reapplied to the areas where the banner grass is grown or used elsewhere. Each of these projects has the potential to have a significant impact in our journey to decarbonizing our system. I spoke earlier about the RNG and hydrogen that we already have in our system. We also have solar panels on the roofs of several of our buildings. And these have provided us with an opportunity to learn about these systems and how we can take the next step forward. The green hydrogen relies on solar energy. And that solar energy, if there is no sunshine, as we saw last week, will either produce less green hydrogen or at times none. And the renewable natural gas, or RNG, relies on these bugs to digest either the waste or the banner grass. And these bugs, they have good days, they have bad days. So production is not steady. It also fluctuates. And this is not, an unusual problem. This is a problem throughout the renewable industry, the problem of intermittency. And we want to remain reliable. So this is something, a challenge that we have to solve for. Fortunately, Hawaii Gas has been operating in Hawaii for 120 years. We have a lot of experience of operating here, and we have a lot of assets that we can use as part of this transformation or repurpose, which again helps us with the affordability part of the equation. I've spoken about hydrogen, renewable natural gas, but of course I want to add renewable fuels to that list. Diversifying of fuel sources allows us to keep decarbonizing and manage that reliability challenge. Renewable fuels like the renewable naphtha that Eric was talking about, or renewable propane, can help us manage our path forward. They can be substituted for the existing fuels or feedstock with limited impact to our current operations. Biofuels have the potential to let us integrate more intermittent renewable fuels and remain reliable. We must, however, balance that with affordability, and that's a topic that others have spoken about. I'll simply add that I won't talk more about the cost side, but emphasize that the potential of biofuels to facilitate our path to reduce our carbon intensity is significant. Because ultimately, that's what we want to do, is to reduce our carbon intensity, keep us reliable, and do it in an affordable way.
Great. Thanks, Nicolas. So I have a couple questions that I prepared, and then I've got a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. One thing, given the theme and the topic of the conference, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this one question. To what extent can biofuels contribute to Hawaii's energy resilience? And also with that, what role can they play in mitigating the impacts of natural disasters and disruptions to energy supply chains in Hawaii? I know we've been talking about a lot of natural disasters lately and resiliency in the state. So I guess I'll just throw it out to whoever wants to take it. The question.
I think I just echo on that. I think by having a diversified slate of renewable alternatives, I think is really key to having resiliency. If you find yourself dependent on one kind of technology or one kind of application, I think that's very limiting. And so I think our experience in the industry here is having a variety of alternatives, having a variety of, I'll call it Plan B or Plan C. And I think that's one of the things that liquid renewable fuels does, is that it provides alternative ways to provide energy in a safe and responsible way, to make sure that the energy is going to be needed, and where it's needed and necessary, that we have alternatives that we can depend upon. The last week or two, in particular on Oahu, I know that's where a lot of us live and work. It rained incessantly for almost 2 weeks, and so that's a period, and that's going to continue into the future. And having something to backstop against days when it's cloudy and the sun just isn't shining intensely enough to really provide power generation or recharge batteries, you're going to need to have something different. And so I think that's where the renewable fuels come into play, as a backstop to, I think, some of the other alternatives.
I think the one thing I'd add to that is if you took 10 gallons of renewable diesel and you looked at the volume it occupies, and you took the same size battery, there's 24 times more energy in the liquid renewable fuel. So having that on hand and ready to be run in our power system is a great way to ensure a resilient energy economy.
And I guess I'll step in, and it's I agree, the liquid fuels are that hedge over time, because it's easy to store, easy to use when you need it, and you could save it up, use everything else while it's available. The other side of it for us is food. We also need to be sustainable and more resilient on our food production. And so with farming, I feel really good that we're bringing more land into agriculture for food as well as energy. And even in the crushing mill, a big portion of what we make is a high protein meal that can either be used directly for food or fed to animals for food. So getting our land back into production for agriculture is is a really important piece for Hawaii when we're looking at resilience during times of crisis.
Awesome. Okay, so I actually have a question from the audience on resiliency. And they're asking, how many days of fuel storage do we need in Hawaii for resilience?
Well, there's actually a PUC target, right? HECO, I think, has to keep 48 days of fuel on hand. So I think that would be my answer.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to take a pivot here. And I know that we've talked a lot about policy and regulation. All of you have touched upon that, right? And the need for, incentives and regulations, right, to help kind of spur the market. I think similar to when it was, solar and wind, right? They've seen a lot of the investment tax credits, or they've seen a lot of regulation that's helping spur that market. So I know that you touched upon that in all of your slides, and this past current legislation, I know there was a lot of bills that were floating around on the production tax credit. I believe there was two, Eric, that you guys were sponsoring, and then two that Pacific Biodiesel was looking at. I know there's an existing production tax credit within the state, but I think there's that 10-year cap for companies. So, and then I know there's the low carbon fuel standard bill too as well, and a couple of hydrogen bills. So I don't know if you guys want to just kind of talk towards the importance of those, what the plans are for the next session, if you're looking at reintroducing the bills, or, the need for support, or what that looks like. So maybe I'll let Eric take that one first.
I was hoping you were going to call on Bob first. Well, let me just describe our proposal. So there is a production tax credit on the books today. It's pretty modest. Works out to 35 cents a gallon for diesel fuel, but there's a cap per company, $3.5 million, and it's just not enough to move the needle, and that's why we don't really have these fuels in Hawaii other than what Bob is doing. So our proposal was to increase that credit to about 60 cents a gallon as a base, and then if you were using local feedstock, so that oil crops were growing or Bob's growing, you get another $1 a gallon, and I think you really need that to make the economics work to grow it here, where costs are higher than elsewhere. And then we also had a separate adder, another $1 a gallon for sustainable aviation fuel. Costs more to process sustainable aviation fuel. There's more capital involved, higher operating costs, and so if you don't have that adder, you're not going to have any sustainable aviation fuel. It's all just going to go into the diesel market. So that's what we propose. We got a lot of good traction, a lot of hearings, and we've got a coalition that we've set up, and we'll be making a big push again next year.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. So like I mentioned in the earlier remarks, that we had been working for a couple of years now, frankly, working with global suppliers of renewable fuels. Bob as well. We've had conversations trying to connect production to end consumers, whether it be utilities or marine or other applications here. And one of the things we see today is there are renewable fuels that are floating by Hawaii every day heading to the U.S. West Coast. And the reason why that's happening is because there's not an incentive mechanism or a legislative approach that would attract those fuels to Hawaii. So until we have that work done and can provide some clarity there, fuels will just continue to bypass Hawaii and going into other markets. There's no technical reason why those fuels couldn't already be in our mix today, other than, as Eric highlighted in his presentation, just the structure that's going to be necessary to attract fuels and get them to be economically viable in this marketplace. And I think that drives a lot of the legislative conversations we've been having in the last session, and hopefully it looks like we'll convene at the direction, I think, the State Energy Department or State Energy Office to develop a working committee to help put together proposals and help work through some of the technical issues to make sure that we've got solutions that will meet the end needs of the state.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a good point on this, is that, when we talk to the legislature about tax credits, they're like, go to the market and do it without tax credits. The reality is that you're right, the fuels will go other places that are willing to incentivize their use, such as California and the West Coast states. It's more and more different countries as well. So if we leave it just to poor folks like me to be putting these projects together, it's going to go very slow. We really scrape together all the resources we can to get to the very next step. So time is not on our side. We've got to make some big moves. We're feeling the impacts of fossil fuels in the environment. And if we're going to make those big moves, we have to have some commitment from the state to incentivize it one way or the other. There's a lot of ways to do it, but we've proposed one. It seems reasonable. To get nothing, I think, really pauses our movement towards renewables. And the other thing I keep reminding some is that if we're going to get there by 2045, we can't start in 2040. These are expensive, elaborate projects. Even the farming takes years to get land into production, get the system set up, get the equipment. We're not going to turn this thing on and off quickly. So we've got to start a push up immediately and start running that ramp if we're going to get there by 2045, and every year is critical.
Yes, the biofuels provide us with the sort of stability to replace some of our existing fossil fuels while integrating more renewables. But we do have that affordability challenge, which comes back to the question that you're just discussing. And if we want to accelerate our adoption of some of these intermittent renewables, we're going to have to find solutions that allow us to integrate some of these biofuels in an affordable way and help us along the path.
Thanks. Bob, I wanted to kind of just touch on something that you talked about, and it's the complexity and the lead time on these projects. What's kind of, I mean, in terms of a lot of the projects that you guys are working on and looking at, like how long do these projects take? What's entailed? I mean, with the land issue, can you get the feedstock locally? Do you have to import the feedstock? Just kind of what does all of that look like in terms of trying to get these projects off the ground?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to that, but to put up a new biodiesel plant, for instance, I think it's a 5 to 8 year process from starting with the blank piece of paper and getting financing and design engineering to get to the production. And it only starts if you've got a business model that works. So for us, in order to build another biodiesel plant, we need to know that we can get the feedstock here. Otherwise, if we're going to import finished product, really there's some very good logistics companies here that can import finished product, finished biodiesel. But to do it in the state, we need feedstock here to work with. So now we back up to the farming side, and it's not just planting seed. It's you'll see the project we have going on Kauai, which is well, my wife will say it's about 20 years in the making, but it's you can't just for us, the risk factor of going huge fast it's a lot. So we're going to do this in stages. And you need crushing mills and combines and planters and things that are pretty common on the mainland for this type of oilseed farming are non-existent. Beyond that, it's the other markets. We don't have a market for the meal. We have people that are desperate to get that high protein meal, but they need to get themselves set up. How do you make that into a full ration for animals? Every time you turn around, there's another thing that is just, you don't have to think about it on the mainland because they do a lot of it, and over here it's non-existent. So we're building a lot of other pieces with this, which is challenging, but it's also exciting. This is going to bring a lot of other agriculture-based, food-based operations into play. So, but it takes time to put all these pieces, and the time starts when we can see that we have a 10-year window of support, which federally and is not there. And the state is, I like Hawaii better, but we need that. We need to feel that commitment from the state as well.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that, or? Okay, we'll go to another question from the audience, and this one is going back to. Hold on, where did it go? Acreage. I think the question, if I can remember it correctly, here it is. How many gallons of biofuel can be produced per acre of land, and how many acres of land would be needed to make a significant difference in Hawaii's energy use? Sorry, I think that was a Bob question too.
Yeah, I'll jump back on that one. So most of the crops that we're doing, we get about 100 gallons per acre per crop cycle, and we do about 3 crop cycles, not the same one, different ones. So about 300 gallons per acre per year. So, for us, I'd like to see, we'd like to get to 10,000 acres, which, by the way, this is pretty small. A family farm in Nebraska will farm a couple thousand acres with two people. So these are low labor, mechanized crops. We've got, a few 100,000 acres of fallow land that could be used for this right now. It's not taking anything away from any other farmer. In fact, giving them some good ground to come in and plant food crops in between. Significant amount. I think when we can get to 20,000 acres, that's when we would look at putting another biodiesel plant in, unless Eric needs that fuel for his RD plant. But either way, it's going to go into energy here in Hawaii. So.
It's interesting. I was talking to John last night, and the number he had was 300 gallons an acre, and that's what Bob just said, and that's actually what we've been using in our company as well. So our kind of aspirational goal, really kind of swinging for the fences, is if we could get 25% of our feedstock locally. And it's going to take a long time to get there, but that would imply 100,000 acres of land. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for the ag sector here. You've got folks that are ready and willing buyers for oil. And so if we can work together and figure out how to do that, the sky's really the limit.
Yeah, I think the number that we look at, and it was in the notes in the presentation, I think at University of Illinois did a study on high-yielding oil crops, and the number they quote is 50 acres per barrel per day. And so we do the math on that, and so in my notes I mentioned that even by 2045, optimistically, 50,000 barrels a day would translate to, you would need 2.5 million acres of farming to supply that 50,000 barrels a day. That's the size of the Big Island. So to credit Bob and the team here and Eric working with Pono Pacific to try and help, we're not going to solve it by but we should do as much as we possibly can and take those steps for sure. But you can see the complexity of this at the scale that we're talking about is going to take a lot of variety of solutions. Certainly agriculture, local production is important and critical for all the other reasons Bob mentions in terms of other parts of the economy and doing right by the INA. But if you think about the totality of what we're trying to resolve here, it's going to take a lot of different solutions beyond just what we're able to do here locally.
If I could add one more thing. Again, the component for us when we're crushing oil seeds is we've got the oil, but we've also got this high protein meal. So I asked the ranchers, well, how much, if I make a lot of meal, how much can you take? And remember, 85% of our meat in Hawaii comes from the mainland. A lot of that we've shipped the cattle or to the mainland and then get the beef back in a not sustainable way. 50 to 100,000 acres of our production would still would not outrun the ranching industry to take that imported meat back to do it here in Hawaii. So they'd be with us. It takes them a while to put this all together, of course, too. But the numbers look good. That we don't want to have to export some component of this back to the mainland. And we wouldn't have to.
So I think we have time for one maybe final question. And this one is kind of addressing a little bit of what we've been touching on, right? Acreage, the land use, obviously being on, a remote island system with limited land availability. And then going back to that kind of question that everyone's been sort of noodling around is, how do you make the best use of the land here, right? And with these projects, it's, is it taking, crops for energy or crops for food? What does that look like? So this question is, do your feedstock crops have multiple uses, or are they only for energy and fuel? And what grade of ag lands are they grown on?
I'll start. So the camelina I mentioned, if you look at the mass, about 40% of that comes out as oil when you crush it. And then about 40% of it can come out as protein. That is USDA approved for animal feed. It has to be blended down to 10% of the content of the feed, but that's sort of what we're looking at for what's left over after you extract the oil.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and again, I'm excited that this does get more food, not less, in the state of Hawaii. It's a shame that we have so much fallow ag land here. We have land that was already farmed. We're not changing the use of the land. It's just going to weeds right now. We have land. We have water. We import all of our food. 90% of our food is. This is wrong. We've got to start taking care of ourselves more here, and so we do look at these different crops, and the other uses are really important to us. Obviously, the sunflowers. We're making sunflower oil, which is spectacular, and the other. So there's other uses for the oil while we're on our way to making fuel out of it, and the meal. And then when you have land that's under cultivation, it's super easy to put another food crop into the rotation, which we do plan on doing. A couple of rotations of oil crops, and then you put in potatoes or rice or something else that is food. For a farmer to go out and grow food in Hawaii is challenging right now. We could have the same conversation with farmers that, how do you support farming in Hawaii when there's cheap imports of other food? But if they had a piece of land that was already ready to go, I think I'm excited about where we're gonna go with creating more food while we're on our way to create more energy.
Okay, so I think to close out, obviously we're talking about the future fuels of Hawaii. So the last question is, looking ahead, what role do you see biofuels playing in Hawaii's energy mix? How can stakeholders across government, industry, academia, civil society collaborate to realize the full potential of biofuels in Hawaii's sustainable energy future?
Well, I hope it's going to play a big role, but I think we have to have the right incentives in place. I mean, it's just a fact of life. So I'm hoping that all of you will help support those efforts in the next legislative session. It's really critical.
I think I would echo Eric's remarks here. I think it's going to be absolutely essential because of this is a very challenging problem we're trying to work through, and it's going to take a very diverse set of solutions to really achieve the goals that we're trying to accomplish here. And so I think collectively working together and sharing information and making sure I'm actually looking forward to hopefully participating on that working group to kind of cast a plan forward for liquid renewable fuels here in Hawaii, and trying to figure out how we get that right so that we get the right incentives in place and help make sure we're managing it so we're minimizing the overall cost to the end consumers and the residents that require this important change.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's one of the challenges we have right now is the difference in price between biofuels and fossil fuel. But when you take fossil fuel off, and you look at the studies that HNAI did on, what is that last 10% really going to cost? If we're going to go the last 10% with anything besides liquid fuel, it's going to be insanely expensive. So at that point, that last 10 or 15% of our energy mix, biofuels is a killer good deal. So that's, if we can stay in that range, we can get to that range where we feel really confident we got that forever. So that'll be a good piece of it.
No, I agree. I think we're integrating renewable natural gas. We're integrating green hydrogen into our system. We want to do more. Those are intermittent fuels. We need something to help us balance the system to remain reliable, and renewable naphtha or other renewable fuels would certainly help us and enable us to move forward at a pace that we're otherwise going to find challenging.
Great, thank you guys so much. I think we're just out of time, but I just want to have a round of applause for everybody coming out today. So.